Really, really delighted to be here with you. Now, what I've been asked to give to you today, like, I could have done slides, but like really is like talk a little bit more about like the background of like, okay, what happened actually, like what led to the creation of our World Food Program Innovation Accelerator, like also share the meal before, and how to make that happen in an organization like the World Food Program. And if you have questions, like there will be time indeed, and like, you can keep on like, writing them in the chat already. Like I don't mind, like whatever comes to your mind. I may actually cover them already, but are we gonna get into that in the Q&A. Now, let me start by the first point that sometimes, a question that comes up is like, so how come, like, and I get this a lot when people saying like, why do we have an accelerator? And like, how did the organization decide that you are gonna do that? Well, it's a good question. Now, the first thing you need to know, like that was actually not my first job in the World Food Program. I actually joined earlier in a role in headquarters that also was working on innovations, now called business innovation still, which is like internal management consulting. A couple of colleagues you heard, Caroline Legros earlier today. So this is one part of the role that I actually built up in the first place. And then after a certain period, like actually it struck me and a friend from WFP at the time to say like, well, it only costs us so little to actually feed a child for a full day. So why wouldn't a lot more people donate money to WFP if you knew this and it was easy for you to do that? And this was kind of the first kind of kickstart of the idea behind Share the Meal, to say like, well, maybe if you have that, you have your phone and you have this button on your phone that you can just press, why not just share a meal? And like right now it's $80 70 euro, and you can still share the meal. It's still the world's actually like most successful fundraising app and app of the year of 2020 of both Apple and Google. Now, but what actually led to this is first, I started working on this with a friend of mine, like on our weekends and after midnight, essentially. And after a certain period of time, really the inside of WFP, there was no support mechanism to support innovative ideas like that. And even like at the time, I was actually quitting my job at WFP together with my friend, and we were doing this full time outside. And at the time, like after several months, I got the opportunity to pitch this to the World Food Program executive director. And and it's like, that is not a given, right? Like to be in front of the executive director and actually be able to pitch these types of ideas is like extraordinary. That has to do that of course I was already in the organization before, and people knew me, so that what I'm doing is like, I'm committed, like this is not something that I'm just dreaming up, like there was a substance behind the concept. But then the executive director actually said, and I remember this, like was Earth Ring cousin at the time, is like, so how much money do you need? Well, it's not even better. So it's like, when we started, it's like, she said like, okay, Bernhard, you have 5 minutes, convince me. And it's like, okay, I tried, I did convince her. And then she said, okay, how much money do you need? And I said, $150,000. And she said, okay, you're gonna get 100. And I'm like, no, why do you do this to me? Anyways, so we were one step closer, but like, the story. Share the Meal is now part of the World Food Program, of course. Like it's successful, but that really also got me to, and this idea of like in WFP, like there's so many of you in the call here today. Like actually, like why are we, why is it so hard? Like, why is it there not a mechanism to support innovative colleagues across the globe? If you have a great idea or other colleagues have a great idea, there should be a way to identify, support, and scale the best innovation that are out there, whether it's like internal colleagues or it's external startups that you find, and actually bring them up and help them go to scale. And this was essentially the kickstarting of the World Food Program's Innovation Accelerator here in Munich, in Germany. We had to find the funding. Right now, it's still essentially, there's very limited corporate funding. So it's essentially directed funding that we get from donors. It's governments and also foundations and private sector. But really, the direction here was, okay, how can we build something that helps colleagues like you in field locations actually make the best happen for the people we serve. And like this is really the thought behind this, because like when you think about what you see in the private sector, like in Silicon Valley and like, you know, Silicon Valley startup founders, it actually works. You have bright people, you have sometimes young colleagues, you know, like you don't have to be super like experienced in your job. Maybe sometimes because you are not as experienced, you have crazier ideas or maybe more innovative ideas, and that's why they're actually better for the people. Now, the challenge oftentimes being, how do you convince somebody that what you're doing is actually really, really good? And let me spend just before I'm wrapping up my comments, just in terms of like how do you actually get there? Let's say you have a great idea. How do you get support for that great idea? I mean, the first thing, and like this is important, is actually make sure you're great in your job. And like, and I don't say this mildly, like this is where, like, even let's say if you have a day job and you want to start something that's an innovation that's not in your job, or it's on the side, or actually in a different area of like what World Food Program does, is like it actually helps you to get more credibility and also more recognition from others when they know that whatever you touch is going to be fully committed to serving people that are vulnerable. We are also part of sharing the values of the World Food Program. You know, like there's certain things that are given. Like if you're performing highly in your role, you're a lot more likely that people who know and have experienced you in that role, they are able to then see you in, okay, well, um, you know, maybe Biran or Rose, you know, I've seen how they perform. So, you know, yes, for sure, they have a great idea. I'm not sure if it's gonna work, but I trust them. I trust them that what they come up with is a great idea. And like this is probably advice number one. Number two is about, you know, really also starting to learn like some more about you know, like what I would say, like some of the critical skills for building that type of innovation. Let's say you want to build a mobile app, and you're saying, well, I want to build a mobile app, but I've never done this before. I mean, okay, step one is just learn about this. There's lots of resources online through the WFP Innovation Network. We can help you, like actually guide you through to free resources that are also on the internet, like things that you can do in terms of just learning about this, reading up on it, what's already happening. And it's a little bit like, let's say if you're currently working in a program and you're a program expert, you don't necessarily have to be an app expert, but you need to have enough credibility in understanding what's out there and actually like making the case for why this is the best idea. And the third advice that I would give you is probably about communications. And this is something, for instance, some of you have participated in our innovation boot camps or in some of the online trainings. It's one of the areas that are super important where, let's say in headquarters, for instance, or when, you know, the executive director or some senior managers come to visit your country office, um, oftentimes, you know, you see them in the hallway, or you have an opportunity and the executive director introduces himself to you, and like, and then you have the opportunity to say like, you know, I'm working in program, that's my job. And then I also work on an innovation, and this is what it does. It's 1, 2, 3, and this is what the big benefit is going to be. You have these snippets of opportunities. I mean, you have them with your own boss. Ideally, your own boss is supportive of what you're doing. Now, of course, you can always approach us as Innovation Accelerator, but as a global infrastructure, we don't have as much capacity. Now, there is also regional innovation hubs initiatives like in Nairobi, in Colombia, for like different regions, different country offices. But don't underestimate the value of communication with your bosses, with the country director, or whoever is actually like visiting your offices also. Because, and it's my prime example for this is like, for instance, in our headquarters in Rome, you will be riding the elevator, and sometimes you're in there with the executive director. You can use that time in the elevator with the executive director by talking about the weather, or you can pitch the executive director your new innovation. Is the executive director going to give you money just by you pitching an idea to him? Probably not. But you know, it's an opportunity, and like it's one of those things like you have to be prepared that in 30 seconds, like what's the innovation idea that you're really burning for? And I think this is an element that it's I know like there's things we as an organization need to do, and like there's also things that have systematically changed. For instance, in the current leadership framework for WFP, innovation is one of the elements that leaders in the organization are being assessed against. So for sure, I think there's going to be more change, like I think the new ways of working and the change program that's happening, it has positive impacts, but it's definitely something that we want to have even more of that in the future. And then just lastly, I think the last, which is kind of a bonus advice, is like be able to navigate the I would say the complexity or the bureaucracy, if you want, of the organization. So if you want to innovate inside of the World Food Program, you need to be able to kind of navigate how systems work. You need to know how procurement works. You need to know how program design works. These are all things that will help you be a lot more effective in your innovations. If you constantly complain about things that don't work and you don't know how to make that happen, that's okay. And by all means, like you need to vent to colleagues, to friends, and like or whatever you need to do. But sometimes it's also you find somebody who is mentoring you, or you find another colleague who is helping you on this, where it's like, let's say, hiring people, making procurement process happen. These are all things you will need to innovate inside the organization. So the more you know about how that actually works, you can make smart choices early on when you start working on innovations, and so that later on you won't have those issues. Okay, with that, I'm probably ending it here for now. And well, I guess we're going to start with Q&A. Well, Nina, I hope that was useful.
That was super useful. Thank you, Bernhard, especially for those 3 tips plus the bonus one, how to, keep innovating within the organization. I think that's extremely helpful for all the champions and innovators here in this group. And now, everyone, this is really your chance, looking at the audience, looking at the chat, to pose your questions that you have for Bernhard. So either raise your hand and then I can call you out, or also looking at the chat, there's something already coming in here. All right. So there's a question from Tan. He would like to ask how ideas in other areas, such as environment, but still supporting the food hunger, could be considered for the grant or for support from the accelerator.
I mean, one thing that is actually always there, we're always looking for so-called wild card innovations, or like categories. So it's like great ideas, great innovations that can help either make emergency response more effective or lift people out of hunger sustainably. Now, I think without knowing the specific innovation, it's always there's different ways how these innovations are being assessed against, and that includes like how innovative is it. Is like what is this potential to go to scale, not in just one region, but maybe even multiple countries? Is it sustainable somehow financially? Does it fit WFP's strategy somehow? And like this is where, and sometimes we do get innovations that are, that's just not for WFP, right? Where we pass it on to UNICEF or to UNHCR because that's within their mandate, but that might still be a great idea. But like, yes, of course, there's definitely if you have ideas, I mean, there's lots of also greening or environmental innovations that have been worked on, like whether it's like, solar powered cook stoves or solar powered pressure cookers, like electric methane reactors, for school kitchens, like so different things. So like definitely there's lots of different areas.
Perfect. Thank you, Bernhard. Then another question that's coming from Dima. Do you think that WFP needs to renovate its business model? Ooh, that's an interesting one.
I mean, I personally, I do believe that we need to modernize WFP constantly. So like, I think this is something we should never be complacent about what we do. And you see this for like 10 years ago, CBT cash transfers were only 2% of World Food Program over assistance portfolio. Right now, it's about 35%. Now you see like that's, modernizing, this is changing. And I foresee that this has to happen and continue to happen going forward. If you ask me personally, we should do a lot more and push a lot harder. Now, and that always has to be balanced with like, there's of course immediate needs and there's like the emergencies, like in where, admittedly, like sometimes like if it's life-saving assistance, I understand like that's not the right time when you may want to innovate. But like, yes, I do think, of course, we should be innovating further.
Thank you. We've another question coming in from Giovanella. Thank you, Bernhard. Your tips are very helpful. Do you have a recommendation on how to go about getting ideas of possible innovations? Sometimes it is hard to see obvious options, areas where we can start innovating.
It's an interesting question. Like, so some of the tools we're, teaching in boot camps, but also in the online courses is, called lean startup thinking or like human-centered design. And human-centered design is about like solving people's problems. So you're trying to say like, okay, who has a problem? So the problem could be like one of the people we serve, or it could be a problem that, I don't know, you or a colleague has, like if you're a program officer or a finance officer and you say like, well, this is really bothering me, this is inefficient, this can get a lot better. So actually starting from like, what problem do you see? And then second question, which is equally important, are you passionate about solving that problem? Is also another, like, let's say, there's oftentimes issues where, people are saying like, well, we really need to revamp process X, but you really are not passionate about doing this. Do you really want to work on it, right? Like, so it's like you do need a lot of energy, a lot of, I would say, stamina to really push through problems when you're working on innovations, like because there's good times, there's bad times. So I would recommend like, maybe you don't necessarily have to have the best ideas also. Maybe you just get together with somebody else who has ideas, but they don't know how to actually tackle them. And then together you can actually do something.
That's some good advice there. Thank you, Bernhard. There's another question coming up from Simon Tarr. Thank you for your discussion presentation. Not everyone will have the opportunity to make presentations to people in specific positions, CDs, ED, regional directors. In your position, it is now the time to start talking to CDs to take innovation as an activity within respective offices.
Yeah. No, and look, I think when we had the global management meeting that happened here in May, actually Munich, we did a side event here for interested country directors. We had more than 80 directors here in our office here in Munich. So all of them got the full exposure that we have. Now, of course, there's more country directors out there that didn't come to us specifically. Now, I do think yes, it is time. And yes, this is part of also what we are trying to do and advocate for throughout the organization. But it's like, it's different ways. There's like, when the executive director sends out, like, this is the World Food Program Innovation Challenge, it's the executive director essentially sending this out to the whole organization. Sometimes, it's also, you may not have the opportunity to talk to the CD. Like, that's totally, like, that's understandable. But this is also where you need to understand, you need to start building your network at a certain point. Like, and either through, that can be colleagues or maybe somebody who's more experienced, maybe your direct line manager is the person who you could actually, like convince, or a person you work with otherwise. And it's not like, I think the one way that is successful is, also think about like, what is currently the priorities in a country. Let's say if in a country like there's a huge crisis of funding coming in, and like that's all the country director cares about, coming up with a programmatic innovation probably in that period of time may not be the best idea. However, if you phrase it in a way of like, look, here I have an idea, maybe this is something that can get us additional funding from donors because maybe they're excited about this type of work or like this type of, like, so you need to tie it back to this type of kind of opportunities. But then again, it's like it's not as easy. Like you can't just like, I mean, okay, I guess everybody can write to the ED, but like, yes, it helps, of course, like if you talk to people in your network that actually interface with you and who know who you are and like who actually know what, how brilliant you are actually like in your thoughts and all of that.
Thank you, Bernhard. Yeah, so basically build your network, use communication. Yeah, I think we now might only have time for one, maximum two questions. I have a question that we already collected beforehand. So Bernhard, that's a bit to you. Kind of, is there anything kind of like on the radar in terms of upcoming events or anything that you're really excited about related to innovation and WFP that you'd like to share?
I mean, I'm excited about this event here right now. So, but like that's of
That's
course
great.
one. Now there's also something that you know at COP27, and this is also like through I mean the great work of like colleagues from the Egypt country office and the region bureau, of course, and like the colleagues in program division like working on climate. I think there's going to be like a lot of talk about innovation. There's several events that are actually happening throughout COP27 that have either an innovation theme and like you know like where we can actually interface. So like that is really it makes me happy. And on the 30th of November, we are going to do like our next pitch event for actually the World Food Program Accelerator program, which of course anybody who wants to follow this, you can also like follow this online. And this always makes me really excited. I have to say we're you know showcasing the great minds and you know also young colleagues, and I can only highlight this again. It does not matter how old you are and how much experience you have, you may be the best innovator. Yes, sometimes you may fail, but that you know you always keep learning, right? Always keep trying. Like you maybe you have better ideas than others, right?
Thank you. I think those are great last words for now. For everyone, all the champions, please keep your questions coming. Okay, maybe one last one, just because I see it from Christoph Hermann coming in. Bernhard, if you're okay for one more. What's the big trends you're currently seeing? AI, crypto, Web3?
Yeah, no, and like this is a good one. Like I think there's probably thematic priorities that I'm seeing, as well as like there's of course technology things that are coming in. Now on what's happening right now, there's a big push towards like you know environment, sustainability, greening, like climate action. So like that's definitely one of the big themes among other things. There's a whole lot of activity about like women's empowerment, gender equality, and you know financial inclusion, that I would say like which is yet another you know trend, but also I think necessary, like ties in very well with what we're doing as World Food Program. Food systems is another one, but also innovative finance. And then there's lots of other topics that you know we can talk about, like which could be really exciting. Now, in terms of technology innovations, I think you know there's sometimes an element when you start working with like mobile apps and data type innovations, which is can be as the ground layer of some of the innovation we're talking about. And then you have artificial intelligence, and then also like crypto, Web3, blockchain, that are you know maybe the icing of the cake or unlocking yet another value. And like I think we're seeing more and more innovations where you know you have an element of artificial intelligence involved, or an element of blockchain or Web3 involved. And I think to me that just shows like it's still early days for those technologies. It's like the same, like I'm sometimes making the comparison, like you know, you may not know how you actually the technology behind sending emails works, and you don't need to know how the technology works. It will be the same for like Web3 and blockchain in a certain period of time, when like you may not need to know because you know something. Oh well, we do blockchain. Okay, fine. No, but like it's definitely gonna be, I think, always a combination of you know really a deep understanding of the problem and then finding the right innovations and technology also.